I mean, I think the majority of human beings hate daylight savings time. So this might be the biggest accomplishment of our government in quite some time.
Punk holders have not had the same intellectual property rights with their punks that Bored Ape users enjoy with their apes. And it was this like really weird dynamic that existed, right? Where everybody's trying to market punks as this, oh, it's like the Bitcoin of NFTs. It's the OG NFT.
The blue zones are regions, geographic regions in the world in which like there are a high concentration of centenarians, 100-year plus survivors.
You can't trust anything anymore. Not only is the Ukrainian stuff propaganda, but the Russian stuff is obviously propaganda. So
what's that Billy Madison quote where he's like, everyone in here is now dumber because of what you just said? And maybe.
All right, everybody, welcome to the show. We are pumped because we have a new structure, format, yet another new structure and format that we want to share with you. But we think this is the best one yet. We're excited to dive in. I'm going to give you the agenda here in a second. How are you fellas feeling? You guys ready to dive into this?
Feeling
good.
Absolutely.
Liking daylight savings. Got a little natural light coming in, which is beautiful.
Yeah. So what, really quick tangent. So what was the news there, Steven? Did that get approved? What's the daylight savings news?
It passed the Senate, I believe. Needs to be approved in the House still.
So the news is no more daylight savings time. Like that's the news.
No, I think daylight savings is permanent, right?
Becomes permanent. Okay.
Yeah.
Most people are going to be confused by that.
Our overlords are declaring via fiat that we are now, we have shifted time 1 hour into the future permanently.
I mean, I think the majority of human beings hate daylight savings time. So this might be the biggest accomplishment of our government in quite some time. Cool. Well, let's kick off. So first of all, our Discord is going off. Hop in our Discord, alfalfapod.com, or the link will be below in the description. This is something that we did per you guys asking. We were trying to figure out, do we do Telegram? Do we do Discord? What do we set up here? And this will basically be the beginnings of our community. There's been some fun stuff going on in there. We're in there along with the community as well. So definitely get in and join. And then last but not least, description below, Collective Shift. Check out our code Alfalfa. There's a free 14-day trial you can check out. We're dropping tons of content every single day. One of my favorite pieces that came out recently is why is proof of stake bullish for Ethereum? I thought there was a really, really great breakdown of that. And actually, I sent a piece to you guys right before this. I sent one of Checkmate's pieces, who's one of the best on-chain analysts in the world, talking directly to the Bitcoin bears about why they perhaps shouldn't be so bearish. So tons of great content. Check that out. And let's dive into the agenda. So what we have established here is that we want to cover three segments in every episode that we do. And those go across investing, which is basically all of our crypto talk, politics/culture, and life, philosophy, and health, everything that falls into that bucket under life. And our intention is to cover these three segments in every episode and give you the agenda up front. So the agenda today on the investing side is Yuga Labs, the entity that owns Bored Ape Yacht Club, Mutant Ape Yacht Club, just bought the CryptoPunks and Meebits, basically bought Larva Labs IP. We're going to dive into this. It's absolutely huge fucking news. It changes the entire landscape of NFTs. Next on politics, we're going to cover Biden blaming Putin for gas prices and inflation and whether he's justified in that or not. And last but not least, the one I'm personally most excited about that I'll be opening up is immortality. Would you, should you, is it possible? Immortality. So let's start off with the fire round. Who wants to give a little alfalfa up front first?
I can rip. So I had a little bag of Luna that I sold this week. So I had about 500 Luna, sold 2/3 of it. And the reason I sold it was obviously the Luna price kind of peaked a little bit, got back up to 100. It was down like 50 or so a couple weeks prior, but particularly the Luna ETH ratio had a little giga moon, and learning from past mistakes, knew it was probably a good time to take some money off the table. So I traded to stables and I'm kind of putting it back into ETH, and I'm also going to put it in like a seed round project. But anyway, sold some Terra, or excuse me, some Luna last week. And then the Looklabs pass, Armand, you might mention this as well. We kind of talked about this a little bit together, but I had 3 mint passes from Looklabs. I sold one of them for around 0.6 ETH. And then I used the other 2 to mint the NFTs for that project. So that's my trades for the last week. Felt pretty good about them, and hopefully they'll play out. So far, the Luna trade is looking good, but time will tell.
Are we going to get to hear about the seed investment in a future Alfalfa round?
Maybe. Yeah, okay. I think so.
All right, cool. Eric, you want to
go? Yeah, sure. Something I did this week was close out some of my shorts. I had been short shit stonks. And that was just like a macro play, and I closed those out this week. And it's a very near-term trade. Like the whole like investing environment right now is driven by macro, I think. And I think the macro, like with rates coming out tomorrow, they're probably going to raise rates 25 basis points. And I think as investors are expecting that to happen, we might see a little rally off that news. So I'm just playing that short term, and I'll flip back bearish. I'll flip back bearish shortly after that, I think.
Steven?
Yeah, theme of this week for me was sitting on my hands. I didn't do anything this week. I think sometimes doing nothing is the best play, especially when you got a high volatility event like FOMC tomorrow coming up. I think a lot of people have been doing nothing. If you check the Bitcoin price for the last 7 days, it's basically like a stable coin kind of consolidating. So probably expecting big moves tomorrow. I think it's probably like 75% that we go up and get a relief rally and that they don't hike, and then that 25% that they hike more than markets are pricing in will probably be pretty bad if that comes to be. But it does sound like everybody is pretty much expecting a relief rally, which scares me a little bit, but I'm remaining optimistic for tomorrow.
And Steven, this is the FOMC, Federal Open Market Committee, Federal Reserve meeting that everyone is looking at. Can you give a little more context of that? I'm curious how you'd explain that to people and the importance of it.
Yeah, I mean, high level, the Fed meets, I think, around like 8 times a year, although they have discretion to meet more frequently. At this meeting, people are expecting them to start tightening, finally, for the first time in a long time. They've been signaling for a while that they're going to be hiking rates. I've seen anything up to 9 rate hikes priced in this year, which I think is personally ridiculous, but we'll see what happens. Fed likes to signal things ahead of time, really hint at what's going to happen instead of just pulling stuff out. Markets hate, uncertainty, and they hate surprises. So they try not to do that. So I think everybody's expecting a quarter point at this point. And I think that we probably rally if we get a quarter point, because it won't be the worst case scenario. And the market is slightly pricing in some percentage of the worst case scenario. So if we don't get that, we'll probably go up a little bit, and, could be temporary, but it'll probably be a little relief. I mean, we could have a pretty big bounce. I mean, we were really, really beat up. Wouldn't shock me at all to have like a really big rally, even for weeks at a time. Perhaps even months, but doesn't mean we're going to be out of the woods quite yet.
So to Steven's point, though, they rarely give guidance, like forward guidance on like what their rate hike schedule is going to look like, or what their tapering schedule is going to look like, or their tightening. If they do that, that could spook the markets entirely, and like this could get real ugly tomorrow. So it's important. Tomorrow is important.
And tomorrow is March 16th. We're recording on March 15th.
Yeah. So I'm sure we'll be circling back to this a little bit when we talk gas and inflation, since it's somewhat related for sure. But awesome. Thanks, Stephen. So for me, yeah, it was the big one also similar to Nick was Looklabs. I'll just pepper it with a little bit more context. So Looklabs is essentially a weed as in like cannabis, NFT play to earn game, similar to Wolf Game, which we over fucking talked about and we love so dearly. Which, by the way, you guys were talking about doing a Twitter Spaces. I was like, man, we should get the Wolf Game gang together for that Twitter Spaces. Those guys are amazing. One of my favorite communities by far in NFT land. Anyway, a lot of Wolf Game people are involved in Looklabs, and Looklabs is an even more robust version of Wolf Game, where you basically build a weed empire. So we're talking about, again, a multi-token, multi-NFT ecosystem. And I made a very similar move to you, Nick. I got the 3 twice. So I had 6, and I think I sold 2 of the passes they gave, got my principal back and some, and then I'm free rolling the rest. And for those people that'd be curious about this, you're going to want to look up Looklabs NFT, their Twitter, go to their Discord. All the official links are inside the Discord. Always go through the official Twitter, social media accounts, or the official Discord of an NFT. And you'll see that you can buy essentially bud, like literally little nuggets of marijuana. And that's how you get started, or a game pass. And I believe that at the moment that we're recording this, the price is still fair value. The game has not kicked off. You would be buying before the announcement of the actual game itself. So if you're bullish on play to earn games, which I am, then I think it's a good buy. So I will be holding until the game news approaches, and then I will be selling, because I ain't got time for this shit long term. I want more ETH.
Love it.
That's all I have to say about that. All right. Big fucking news. This changed everything. Yuga Labs buying CryptoPunks. Eric, break it down, man.
Yeah, I'll give some context on this. So this, first of all, is the largest acquisition in NFT history. These are the 2 biggest players in the entire space. And, what I want to do is gauge your guys' opinion on how you feel about this acquisition, on this merger, but also ask Nick how he's feeling about it as a CryptoPunk holder himself. Because I have my feelings as a punk holder myself. I have my feelings, and maybe Nick, your feelings have evolved over time, because mine initially started one way, and then now I'm kind of modifying. So I guess
that's a great place to start, by the way.
Yeah. So, I want to start with like the broad, like, how do you guys view broadly, like, consolidation in the industry, particularly with the 2 biggest players in the space? Armon or Steven, You guys want to take it?
I am very curious, Nick, as a punk holder, your overall sentiment. I love this topic. I have a lot on it. I'll give little pieces of it throughout this segment. But I said this during our barbecue. Like, ultimately, this is an M&A deal, just like in traditional business. But what's most fascinating about it is that every other NFT collection is nothing more than a creator like us, a developer or 2, an artist, and a Discord and a Twitter. Like, we're talking about bare bones. It's not even a business. The fact that Yuga Labs is approaching their entire business with this level of professionalism, and, by the way, news coming out that there's possibility of a fundraising event with A16Z, a $5 billion valuation. There's a lot happening that is going to affect this industry in huge ways. So my very big picture, without going into detail, sentiment is that this makes me more bullish than ever for NFTs. This tells me that we're in the earliest stage of some of the marketing, because the kings of marketing are Yuga Labs and the Bored Ape Yacht Club, which is the exact opposite of the CryptoPunks community and culture, which I would love to get into and how that might play out. But overall, I think there's a lot of pros and also a lot of cons to this whole deal, but net positive in the end for me.
Yeah, I think it's clearly positive for the NFT space as a whole. I would be curious if anybody has a argument against that. I think the more nuanced point is whether or not it's positive for CryptoPunks and CryptoPunk holders. I think even for punk holders, it's a net positive. There were issues with punks, right? Like the big gripe that's been in the punk community is that punk holders have not had the same intellectual property rights with their punks that Bored Ape users enjoy with their apes. And it was this like really weird dynamic that existed, right? Where everybody's trying to market punks as this, oh, it's like the Bitcoin of NFTs. It's the OG NFT. It's so decentralized and counterculture and OG. But at the same time, like there's like some, centralized authority there basically willing to sue you if you use your punk to do anything other than put it on like a hat, right? I think like you could make a hat with your punk, as some of you have done, but like you don't have any digital rights, which is kind of useless for NFTs.
No commercial
it's been
rights
like
with
very
that hat.
apparent. Yeah, it's been very apparent that Larva Labs, the founders of CryptoPunks, are not business people and don't really want to be business people. So there were only so many outcomes I think that could happen in the long run here. The first was that this like status quo sort of persisted, which was like really crappy, or they were going to make an effort to monetize internally, which was probably not going to happen because they don't want to run a business. Clearly, they just kind of want to make art, which is cool, but they're not business people. And the last alternative was that they sold the rights to somebody. So I think it was inevitable that the rights got sold, and it's probably a good thing that it went to Yuga, because it could have gone to a thousand other different corporate, like if they sold CryptoPunks to Nike, right? That's probably the death of CryptoPunks. Like there are a lot worse things that could have happened here. I think Yuga's demonstrated that they're like really good at the space. I mean, we were talking about a project that started like a year ago, basically, that has just gone on to basically buy out the biggest project in existence, like the OG project, right? So they seem to know what they're doing. There's obviously fears, I think, that like punk people tend to think that, well, and I don't want to speak for all punk people, but there's this like idea in the punk community that like the apes are kind of a little bit cringe in terms of like the marketing, especially. And they would hate it if Yuga were to start marketing punks like they market apes. But I think the Yuga people are pretty obviously good businessmen. They sort of, I think, understand the like this very basic concept that when you have like a brand, you can kind of leave it in its own brand silo and let it be that brand. You don't have to like smush all of your brands together like all of the the great corporations that have done this kind of multi-brand portfolio know that. And I expect the same to happen here. And yeah, I think it's gonna be good for the space, because I have this thought, and a lot of people have this thought, right, that like we're gonna evolve what it means to be an NFT. Right now, everybody's just like, oh, look at this little profile pic I have on my Twitter account. But in the future, I think it's going to be so much more than that. I think we're going to start to see a lot of like kind of media be developed around NFTs. You're going to see, you might start seeing stuff in movies and TV shows, and in just turning these things more into sort of characters in the same way that people watch Star Wars movies and they wanted to go out and buy Star Wars merch. I think we're going to start seeing people experiment with that in the NFT space. That opens this up to like happen with CryptoPunks, for people to kind of do things with their punks that they couldn't do before. I know that like G Money especially was trying to like do a lot of things in the punk space with punk comics and some other stuff, and he couldn't like use his punk, his like famous Ape Punk, like in any of his marketing, because he didn't really have the rights to it, which just seemed kind of whack. So I look forward to the door this opens.
Couldn't agree more. Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to mention is how caught off guard and what a surprise this deal was. I mean, Eric, we had a little rumblings and rumor rumblings in the CryptoPunks Telegram we're in, but I wasn't even paying attention enough to see them. And so when it got announced, I was totally caught off guard. And I think I didn't even think of it as an option, prior to this happening. And I think if you would have polled CryptoPunk owners and say, let's assume you have a vote in this deal, would you like it if Yuga Labs acquired CryptoPunks? I think you'd have a super majority saying no, and half of crypto Twitter just throwing a fit over the owners of Bored Apes and Mutant Apes kind of acquiring the IP. So the fact that they kept it quiet was like a very good execution on their part, because I think it would have been really bad if this thing would have leaked, and would have been way worse than it did now. And now that it's done, I guess at first I was a little bullish, and now I'm just kind of a little nervous. I will say that I think this is better than what Larva Labs was planning on doing. They hired like a third tier agency to kind of represent their IP rights. And this came out maybe like 9 months ago or something. And it was a little questionable what they're going to do with it. Are they going to create this cringe Netflix special? Or are they going to put a movie about it? And the risk was to the downside in all of these projects that people were dreaming up. One thing that I've always kind of hung on to is something that Steven said, is that you look at all the maybe creative art / culture pieces in humanity, they never really had a marketing engine behind it. Like the Mona Lisa is a good example, right? The Mona Lisa never had an agency marketing its value. It just kind of had these natural things about it that created value, and kind of humanity decided over time that it had value. And CryptoPunks was the ultimate because it started off free. You could mint it for free. It started in 2017 as one of the first NFTs. There's no royalty fees on trading. It's even an old version of an ERC token. So it kind of dates back, has some cultural significance. What I look forward to is Yuga Labs just giving out the copyright, like kind of going open with it, letting punk holders do it with what they want, and then not doing anything else. I don't want them to do anything else on that. If all they did was give punk holders the rights to use them in a business and whatever they want to do, that would be a big win, and they don't have to do anything else other than that. A few more points, like if you look at when Bored Apes kind of really started to lift off, is when they announced that Bored Apes, you have the copyright license. You can do whatever you want with your Bored Apes. And you saw Jimmy I forget his like Twitter name, but Jimmy ETH, I think is his Twitter name, and Nicky Ads, who's Snoop Dogg's manager. They created a band of Bored Apes. No one knows who's like the artist behind it, but they created a band. And then you had Jenkins the Valet team up with Neil Strauss, multiple time best-selling author, to kind of license these these apes into a book. So you have all these like creative things coming up. And I think that's what I would hope going forward, is that they open up the copyrights and punk holders naturally turn them into, their own unique projects. And that is the marketing behind it, and touch nothing else. The last thing I'll mention, we could chat about a little more, is I think the biggest loser is Opensea from this, because one thing that CryptoPunks had was their own marketplace before Opensea started. And as a punk holder, you don't trade on Opensea, even though it's one of the, top traded NFT projects. You trade on the Larva Labs website. And so Larva Labs has a lot of great technology around their own private marketplace, and they have a lot of technology behind Meebits. And, maybe Yuga Labs, in addition to freeing up the copyright, will also, create their own private marketplace for Bored Apes, Mutant Apes, and the whole collection, and could start, somewhat of a competitor to Opensea.
Yuga Labs itself. will.
Yuga Labs itself, I think,
yeah.
you know, if they're smart, because, you know,
For sure.
Opensea takes a 2.5% rip. So give their community, which would certainly follow them, a private marketplace to transact.
That's like a one in the cons bucket for, you know, the consolidation aspect that overall perhaps is not a good thing for the NFT industry. But then you'll just see more and more of those pop up and
why is consolidation not good for the NFT industry?
You asking me?
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't it seem a little against the ethos of the whole thing we're in? Is consolidation, centralization?
I've always thought this whole narrative is just like bullshit, right? Like I don't think anybody cares about decentralization and like NFTs to like the extent that Bitcoin is decentralized, right? I think there's some sort of like viable amount of like permissionlessness that like I think people find like cool. But like the idea that like all these NFT projects are just going to sprout into existence like Bitcoin and then just go out there and be valuable forever and just exist on there, like it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like NFTs have always seemed to me more like kind of like in the line of like brands, and I don't see anything wrong with like these kind of big, you know, you call them future, they're going to be future corporations or conglomerates, right? I mean, Yuga Labs might be like a $10 billion company right at this point, right? That's crazy.
The platform thing is okay. The platform thing is okay. What's more important is the IP thing. If there's going to be a consolidation of platforms and you have to go to a specific company's platform to purchase that NFT, that's okay. As a user, I'd rather have a platform that has everything like LooksRare or OpenSea all in one place. I can browse, I can compare. I have the same charts. I have the same data. I like that as a user. But like, sure, if I have to go to Yuga Labs,
we're going to have aggregators. We already have aggregators.
We already have that.
People are building them. Like this is just going to be a thing in the future, right? Like the liquidity of the NFT market's going to get split, and it's going to get split like crazy. Like we haven't even launched Coinbase NFT yet, right? There's going to be multiple Coinbase NFT, centralized NFT marketplaces. You know, we're going to start seeing more like iPhone apps that do NFT. There's going to be like fragmented liquidity all over the place, and there's going to be a whole market of trying to aggregate this stuff and make it easy on the user. I don't think it's that big of a deal though, right? Like if it's like if you're a user and you're shopping like for like an ape, like
this is
are you really not going to buy it because you know
no consolidation only matters to Nick and I. We care about the consolidation because we don't want to lose the ethos of our project. Like it's not necessarily about the consolidation itself. It's the fact that like Bored Apes had their own project's ethos. CryptoPunks had their own. CryptoPunks was sort of regarded as this like do nothing profile picture, but it was just the OG. And Bored Apes was this like highly commercialized, you know, competitor that ended up, you know, actually flipping CryptoPunks recently. But it's like, I think CryptoPunks at large don't want the yacht parties and the Miami, you know, like the Miami gatherings or whatever.
There was actually a lot of stuff going on during NFT NYC last year that I found tweets around where people were upset in the CryptoPunks community that there was not a single gathering or anything like that happening while there was this huge like Bored Ape gathering happening. So I think that's partly true, but you guys, I speak to the holders, you guys had your little breakfast. Like you guys like that stuff too, don't you?
I think it's a fair point to point out. And then let me actually just draw upon some actual feedback because Nick and I are part of this group chat with like really, really awesome people in NFT space. Like I won't quote any of them directly, but I'll tease who's in there. It's like G Money and Farouk and Deez and Richard, like the biggest players in the NFT space are in this chat with us, and they're all giving their feedback on the deal. And I think what kind of started at first was like this reluctance. I think everyone's identifying the risk that's associated with like a new owner, you know, as Yuga Labs takes over, they can like maybe fuck this up for us. And DC investor, he tweeted this, so I'll quote him. He said, like, it feels like my favorite corner bar just got turned into an Applebee's.
That's
and I think I think that's kind of fair. That's like how I was feeling at first, but like my sentiments have evolved. And I think the reason why is because it's like it's easy to disassociate an ownership group from a brand. You know, like Bored Apes are a brand underneath underneath Yuga Labs, right? Bored Apes is a brand. Like they can have a different brand. They can have CryptoPunks mean something else for, you know, like it can be its own brand. And I think that's totally fair. Here's a quote from somebody. This is a very bullish quote. Somebody said, "Punks are Kanye before Rockefeller. They're about to become Kanye West. Gonna go up. They'll lose a little bit of soul, but we're gonna go up."
They're gonna lose a lot of soul, man.
So I think the fear is losing the soul. I think that's it. But so here's like, I think some news leaked that they were gonna go out. Like I think maybe you guys even talked about it. Like Yuga Labs is literally gonna create their own metaverse. And they're going to use the ape token as the currency in their own metaverse. So this acquisition was maybe like a week ago when I was like looking through these messages. There was like 1,700 messages to read through. So I read through all of them, and people were saying like they're actually more interested in Meebits because in their metaverse they wanted like the greatest avatar 3D technology, and that's Meebits. So they got it for their metaverse, and they had like previously partnered with this 3D animation company called Animoca. So like they were kind of like telegraphing their moves already, just trying to go to this metaverse. But the interesting thing now is that Yuga Labs now owns all of Matt and John's punks. They own all the punks. So I don't know how many punks they have now, but it's in the hundreds of punks.
1,400, I think I read.
So yeah, okay, whatever it is.
Oh,
Meebits. I think 1,400 Meebits is probably like 200 punks or something like that. Yeah. I don't remember how many, but it's a ton of punks. They own more punks than they own Bored Apes. So it's like it's in their interest now to make punks still winners. And then lastly, one person in this chat says, you know, basically to Steven's point on how like Matt and John, the original founders of Larva Labs, weren't doing anything for the community. This guy goes, in all fairness, Yuga has already done more for the community than Larva Labs ever did. And that was just basically buying Larva and giving us the rights. Yeah. And you know, when Nick and I were at the breakfast in Denver, there was like a consortium trying to like buy out the rights, our IP rights. Like there was like kind of like a, you know, like people were murmuring in the crowd, like, are we going to buy the rights? And like, we just got them. We just got them for free.
Dude, I think that this was...
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Go for it.
Yeah, I like, what do you guys think about the future of Ape and Punk prices? Because I think this is bullish for punks, but I think it's more bullish for apes. And I used to be like really dead set that, you know, punks were long term going to always be higher value than apes, but I don't know if that's true anymore, right? Like I don't know if you can be like the OG crown jewel project, but you're just like an acquisition from some startup, right? Like how do you reconcile those two things?
That was their baby. They'll make sure their
question.
baby wins.
That was my final question to Nick. Is like, how does this affect our bags, meaning punk holders? And like, I used to have this feeling inside. It was like this proud feeling of like being a punk. You know, it's like, no, we're the OGs. We're the first. Like we're the baddest in the land. And now it's very clearly like an adopted stepchild kind of feeling. And like, you know, you guys
may not be the last though, Eric. This may not be the last. Like there's a lot that can happen and unfold over the next 5 to 10 years.
It's not the
across
last.
the space as a whole. So
just
whether you end up number one or number two, I think it's still a great situation.
So when we were hanging out on Sunday, I made like the counterpoint that like, you know, Walt Disney Company started Mickey Mouse and, you know, all their original content, but then they acquired Star Wars and Marvel, Avengers, et cetera. And like Marvel and Avengers are doing way better than Mickey Mouse is right now. Their baby is Mickey Mouse, but like they've acquired this other asset that's performing way better. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you just like stick to your baby only.
And now but here's one of the interesting things no one has pointed out yet. So Larva Labs did not make money off the transaction fees, right? They did not make money there was no royalties, and there still will not be with Yuga Labs. They don't have a monetization strategy on this acquisition. There is no.
They bought all Larva Labs as punks, though, right? Like 400.
That was part of the deal,
punks or something, right?
Just make number go up, I guess.
That was part of the deal, but we have no idea what the number is, what the transaction amount was for this acquisition. Point being, I'm sure there's an amount of money that they need to make off this deal long term. The best thing that they did was give the rights to the punk holders, because you guys, I'm referring to you guys as punk holders, like that was a pretty fucking serious situation. That was a contentious situation, and it was only getting worse. And I think what happened is the Larva Labs guy, obviously what happened, I mean, look, it happened 2 months later. They immediately went, whoa, we are not cut out for this. To Steven's first point, is like, they are not business people. They want to create. They're artists. They found an opportunity to align with a group of people that do what they can't do. And it allows them to continue their little incubator of creativity underneath the Yuga Labs umbrella. But you both said something that I think was wishful thinking, if I may. There is no way they're ever just going to say, okay, all we're going to do is give the punk holders the IP rights and then watch the rest unfold. No way. They're going to integrate this thing into their games, into their sports opportunities. I mean, whatever media opportunities, TV, movies, whatever it is, they're going to fully utilize these things as much as they can. So there will be a top-down executive
they're gonna,
strategy
keep them separate from ape culture, though. I think
sure
there's a difference between like trying to add value versus bringing them adjacent to the apes, which like I don't think that they'll do.
No, they won't do that. But they won't just be like, here you go, we're not going to do anything with this.
Well, I don't think anybody said that. I don't think anybody thought they were just buying them out of the goodness of their heart to just gift all the IP to people.
No, I'm addressing a specific point, Stu. Nick said that exactly. So I hope that that's what they do. And I'm saying, I don't believe that they will do that. That was the point I'm addressing.
Yeah, well, I don't think they're going to just leave them there and do nothing.
Yeah, we're saying the same thing, bro. We're saying the exact same thing.
Well, I didn't realize Nick said that.
Yeah, the first thing they can't
it's crazy talk, Nick.
They can't apply a royalty fee to punks. That was like my first. I was like, can they do that? They literally can't do that. Like the free open marketplace is built in to the smart contract of CryptoPunks, so you can't just like slap on a royalty fee. So that would be like a simple.
Oh, they couldn't even do it if they wanted to. You're saying
right?
Interesting.
Because that would be like the simplest like business value add of all time. Like,
it's built into the contract.
Right. So you can't do that. Have you guys heard of this guy named, his name's actually Guy Oseary? He was like the talent agent. I think he represents like U2 and Madonna. He's the guy that Yuga Labs, Bored Apes, partnered with. And I think it was like an overwhelming, like there's a consensus in the CryptoPunks chat that this individual, Guy Oseary, has been like solely responsible for the full commercialization and like celebritization of Bored Apes. So, like the fact that we got like Gwyneth Paltrow and, Bieber
Paris
and whoever
Hilton.
else, whoever else, like it's all because of this guy's connections. So I think like everyone in this chat respects this individual and is like, having this guy now on our team is an asset.
Yeah, I guess as long as you're okay with some of these being given away to,
well, we're just going to lose a little bit of our like OG crypto focused ethos. I think that's what we're going to have to sacrifice. It's the Kanye thing. You're going to lose a little bit of soul. I'm with you
guys. I hope that these two brands can remain as, exclusive as possible, and that the creative incubator of Larva Labs just keeps doing its thing, and CryptoPunks maintains its culture. Unfortunately, it's basically like Apple buying Microsoft, like after a certain amount of time, and they kind of are, but by the way, I think you guys agree with that kind of general, like the comparison of the brands. The whole thing though, how it's going to play out over time could completely change. I have a few little things that I thought about as well. I just thought I would mention on this topic, like some pros and cons. So I think the biggest pro by far is this IP rights thing. It's impossible to predict how big that's going to be. I think it's absolutely massive, which leads to the value of the collections as a whole going up, both of them, all of them, all these collections. The popularity increases. CryptoPunks are not nearly as mainstream as Bored Apes. They will become more mainstream. Derivative works are huge. They were not possible before. Now they are possible. CryptoPunk holders being at odds, with their creators. That wasn't good. That wasn't a healthy environment for owners. And many prominent figures sold because of that. And I think now you're going to see a different type of holder come in, and that has good and bad associated to it as well. But yeah, like I said, streetwear, events, more NFTs, way beyond just a profile picture. And ultimately the holders win as a result of that. But a few things that I think are concerning is I think the contrast between the brands will reduce. Right now, there's a lot of contrast, and it's impossible for them to not, for the Bored Ape culture to not seep into the CryptoPunk culture to a certain degree. I also think CryptoPunk holders don't really respect the Bored Ape Yacht Club community. That's super true.
Nick, do we have to give our seed phrases up right now? Right on demand? We just have to give it up.
Our crypto IQ decreased immediately upon acquisition.
I saw a tweet that said CryptoPunks just got acquired by some guys that don't even know what a blockchain is. No respect, man.
What's that Billy Madison quote where he's like, everyone in here is now dumber because of what you just said? And maybe I'm teasing, but there's definitely a little bit of that talk going around. So Armand, you're probably right. They're not going to just, open up the rights and just sit on it, right? There has to be some profit motive, even if it's in the long term. What I hope what those things are, I wouldn't mind a little bit of centralization around the merchandise, specifically, getting Punk's merch in the hands of Punk owners. I wouldn't even mind if it's beyond Punk owners. But I think that's one thing that people kind of deep into the community have done on their own. I have a few pieces. Eric created some. We've kind of just done it on our own. It'd be nice to have that available. And I think a crypto unique way would be interesting. And then second would be getting more Punk owners in person events. If they centralize some personal meetups, because I do think the power, now that the copyright is in the hands of the Punk holders, I do think the long-term power of this community is what the community actually creates. And how can they commercialize it and turn it into unique projects that are only unique to crypto, and turn them into some, businesses that have their own profit motive, but also, kind of spread the word and spread the value. Like if you look at any networked type of business, the more nodes, the more valuable those nodes, the more valuable the network gets. So I'm hoping that, there are zero tangential businesses created from Punk copyright, but maybe, a few years from now, there will be a few businesses that are created and few projects that are created from it. And that will spread. Stephen asked, what do you think about prices long-term? I've always questioned whether CryptoPunks and any NFT project for that matter will beat out ETH. Meaning,
yeah, are we talking dollars or ETH,
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the ultimate question you have to ask is will this earn you more ETH in the long run? And if it doesn't, then you're losing dollars. And if you're in it for the sole purpose of making money, then you have to always ask that question. So
you have to factor in inflation, right?
Yeah.
So 5 years time dollars, you got to beat dollars.
You got to beat out a 8-10% inflation, and you got to beat out ETH, which has shown 180% annual returns since inception. So you have to keep that in mind with any NFT project. And I've kind of, in my private chats with Eric and other punk holders, like always asking the question, do we think this is going to beat out ETH? And I'm always been skeptical that it will. So we'll see how this plays out in the long run. But I think for anyone, getting into NFTs as a beginner, even, the question is, will you make more ETH in the long run? And if you won't, then, just stack more ETH.
That's some
I think
alfalfa,
like
by the way.
scarcity though, like, there's only 21 million Bitcoin. There's only 10,000 CryptoPunks.
But there's, 200,000 right now, PFP, projects, or excuse me, PFP NFTs that you could buy into, and there will be 2 million. And
there were a ton of ICOs in 2017, and, 3 assets probably made it to, $80 billion market cap.
I mean, it's up to Yuga Labs to screw up, right? Like, I think they could certainly screw it up, but they've at least their messaging is on point. We're not going to do much. We're going to give you the rights. We're going to listen, see what people create, and then kind of go from there. But I would love a little merch site. You connect your wallet. It verifies you're the owner, and it now shows you like all the merch you can buy. Like, I think the more they just put punk owners together in a community, particularly in person, the more value it'll naturally create. They don't have to do much.
I just think we should transition on this topic. I just think it's absolutely nuts that this company, it's a handful of people. There's also a woman involved, right? Started this project in like January of last year, 13 months ago, launched April 23rd, like 10 months ago, and just acquired the #1 project of all time that started 4 years before them, and are probably worth $5 to $10 billion.
Right. They're raising at a $5 billion valuation. They were started less than a year ago. This probably is the fastest rocket ship of all time in any business ever. So I think that probably should be the through line to this whole thing.
The alpha is to get building, folks. I think that's the alpha still.
Sell NFTs, don't buy them.
Yeah. I think we should probably wrap it and transition. I'll give you Let's one parting thought from Cosimo de Medici. I think he put out a tweet talking about how it's sort of inevitable that all great art, which is counterculture, eventually becomes mainstream as sort of like a part of its hero's journey. So we shouldn't really expect anything different from punks, and what's happening isn't necessarily abnormal. So
well,
chew on that.
Cool.
Chewing. Well, Stephen, lob up set the stage here. On
we're just gonna take a hard left into politics.
Time to that was a perfect little bow.
I know I should have prepared a more
what's on your mind, Stephen?
There.
What's on your mind?
I feel like I'm being gaslit, boys. I feel like I'm being gaslit by the Biden administration.
I feel you. I feel you.
I feel like back in the day, right? Like, we always had these kind of narratives kind of planted in us from the government and the media, but like maybe we weren't like as attuned to it back then. But now everything seems like really like blatant and obvious to me. Like, things. Like, people are pulling strings and trying to poke your buttons, and it's not subtle anymore. I think what really embodied this for me is the last week, just seeing the rollout of Putin's price hike. Everywhere I look, it's Putin's price hike. It's on all the big checkmark Twitter accounts. It's in all the newspapers. It's in like the press conferences, right? Putin's price hike, and. It's not so much a policy thing to me, so much as the fact that like they really do think that all of us are just really stupid, either stupid or just so desperate to defend the red team or the blue team that they know will just sort of like latch on to anything that they throw out, and this to me is like such a example of this, and because I'm more than 40 days old. I remember a time when gas has been going up basically for the last, year and a half nonstop. I think gas was already up 60% year over year before the invasion happened, and then we had like another like blip, and it was noticeable. But like this has been a thing that's been happening for quite some time, and it's not the result of Ukraine. It's the result of like a variety of policies that have been pursued, like many of them by this administration, and they're sort of trying to pass the buck off, using the war. And it seems like they're trying to pass a lot of bucks using the war. They're passing the gas buck, right? They're trying to pass the inflation buck in general, right? Like, oh, it's inflation. Yeah. Oh, yeah. This war. God, inflation's going to happen. Oh, it's such a bummer. Such a bummer. Like we might not have had that before, but now, oh God, I just wish we could do something about it. But yep, inflation. And they're also sort of quietly sweeping COVID under the rug too. It's just like, while this war has been going on over here, it's like suddenly, like I haven't seen Tony Fauci on TV. When was the last time you saw Fauci? He's like gone. Like, it was right. They're rolling back all these regulations, and they're doing it kind of quietly. And like, meanwhile, there's been like no change in like deaths. Like, I looked at the death stats and I was like shocked to notice that they're like still trending up in like a lot of areas.
It was the State of the Union. The State of the Union address. He just goes like, yeah, and I don't know if you saw this, but the CDC said, yeah, we don't need masks anymore. And then just like moved on with the State of the Union.
Yeah, and it's just like, I feel like my eyes have been really open to the fact that reality is just not what it's presented to us as. And like, a lot of the stuff that we think we know, or this is what's happening, is what isn't happening, this is what, it's just all kind of fake to a degree, right? Like, I'm not saying that like COVID wasn't real, but like, when we decided to have the policies when they were politically expedient, and we swept them under the rug as soon as they became unpopular, right? It didn't have anything to do with like facts, logic, and science. And you're seeing the same thing now with this other stuff. We're just constantly being distracted and, pushed all these narratives. And it's like really hard to parse what's actually happening in the world now, right? I mean, even with the war itself, like it's very confusing. I find it confusing. Like I'm seeing takes from a lot of sides, not even like, from the administration, but just generalized takes about we should be here, we shouldn't be here, we should be more isolationist, we should be more proactive, and it's rough out there. So I just
what direction do you want to guide this in? Because I think like we all agree that question. Like we're being fed a line of bullshit by the administration. I think my first thing is like, are we uncommon, the four of us here? Like, we see this and we read total bullshit.
No.
Like, are we uncommon, or is everyone? No. I think many people are reading this is complete bullshit. And I think that's probably part of like the whole thing. So like this distrust.
The sector that was going to be an observation I've been having lately is like the sector of society that used to just accept this bullshit is shrinking. And you can see this as true if you just go on social media and you go on certain people's profiles that represent different types of thinking across the full spectrum, the political spectrum. And you see that on both sides, or all sides for that matter, everyone is laughing at this comment that Russia and the war is responsible for the gas prices. And not everyone, a larger and larger segment of people are saying, do you think we're stupid? Like the exact comment that Steven just made. That gives me so much hope in general, as a citizen, as a global citizen, as an American, as a person who is very concerned about the level of bullshit and how difficult it is to parse out what's true anymore and what reality is. It seems like human beings are starting to focus more on the conversation that they're having amongst each other than they are what they're being told from the external world looking in. They're kind of going to each other in the grassroots level and saying, what is true? And in these types of conversations, that gives me hope personally when I see stuff like that.
I think it's important.
We're all just having like a big emperor has no clothes moment I hope collectively, and I am seeing that like splitting of people. Like when I read Twitter, like there's like actually like a delineation in my, like when I parse through the comments, I look at people and I'm like, oh, you're one of the, you ever see the meme with like all the anons just with like all like the little like CNN thing, and they're just like repeating stuff, right? And
actually, I see that meme. Every time you describe a meme,
popular.
I'm like, I know.
It's like the I support the current thing meme, right?
Yes,
like that character. And like there's like people who are like asleep and there's people who are awake, and I'm just like seeing that like dichotomy kind of more and more now when I'm like looking through Twitter. I'm like, oh, you're a bot. Like not like, sometimes it probably is like an actual bot, but I'm just saying like you're like a robot. Like you're just like taking in stuff and spitting it back out and not doing any critical thinking. And then there's like all these people who are very clearly like not having it anymore. And there's this kind of like, and there's bots on both sides, right? There's people who are like, there's like the blue and the red bots, and they're just sort of like fighting each other just mindlessly, like while like all this stuff is happening. And then there's the people who've kind of stepped outside of it and they're going like, wait a minute, this shit's like really, really whack.
I think we should point out how brazen, Biden's comments and just the administration in general's comments about blaming this on a war in Europe is. So last Thursday, so by the time this publishes, about 1 week ago, Biden had this quote, and this was immediately after they came out with February's inflation number, and the inflation number was 7.9%, and it shows the last 12 months of inflation, basically comparing this February to the previous February. So last 12 months of inflation. And just for context, the invasion happened, I think the 24th. So it's the last 4 days of February. Okay. So he says this quote: "Today's inflation report is a reminder that Americans' budgets are being stretched by price increases, and families are starting to feel the impacts of Putin's price hike." So he labels it Putin's price hike. That it was 4 days out of a 365-day data set, in which the impact hadn't fully been felt by the market. And so, it's just so brazen. And they started using this, in January's inflation print, started just talking about, the prospects of war in general and kind of like sucking up the news cycle instead of to distract us from this inflation print. So it just shows you how brazen and how stupid they think we are of, that 4 days of data last through.
Nick, you called it on our last recording.
Totally
said, here's what they're going to do. And, I think to all of our points, it was like, it's not necessarily a Biden issue. It's like anyone who was in power at that time would have used the same tactics, because it's just like it's a simple way to try to distract the populace.
It's easy,
but as long as the populace is stupid. But we're saying that people are waking up.
And here's I think I wrote down 3 points that I think we're kind of like pride ourselves on being in the center of the road and kind of being willing to be open to both views and trying to focus more on data. But I think that there will be 3 points that most people will latch onto, and it hopefully won't kind of impact the voting in the midterms. One, the COVID relief bill that Biden passed in early 2021 was super inflationary. It's $2 trillion. It wasn't necessary. All I had to do was just let the economy grow and develop, and we would have been roughly in the same place we are now. The infrastructure bill was a great bipartisan second. So the infrastructure bill was a good example of bipartisan agreement, but still, when you pass a multi-trillion-dollar bill that sucks up, kind no matter where you spend it, inflation is going to go up. And then third is the Keystone Pipeline. I think he kind of banned it in day one of his presidency. And you look 9 months after that decision, you had a 60% increase in the oil price from that decision. So I think for the most part, if you exclude the people who identify themselves as blue only and kind of like what Steven said, just kind of follow whatever narrative the blue party is kind of echoing at the time, I think people will remember those three things: that the COVID relief wasn't necessary. It was inflationary. Infrastructure is a great bipartisan bill, but also inflationary. And the Keystone Pipeline of limiting, our own domestic oil production and exporting that oil production, is a contribution to the high oil prices. And so I'm hoping that will be the case, because I think that's somewhere where people should follow the data and follow what actually happened. But come November will be decision time.
You know what the oil stuff actually kind of reminds me? It reminds me of the oil and the inflation state. It reminds me of the original mask stuff, right? Where COVID happened, they're like, oh, don't wear masks, and then it kind of gave this like elaborate reason, and like your common sense for like a lot of people was like, I don't know, they must help like a little bit in some situations, right? And they're like, no, like, and they did the same thing with like inflation, right? Like they started spending all this money, like, and a lot of people were just like, this is going to be really inflationary, right? They do these things that are like really obvious, right? And then they trot out like a bunch of like academics to explain this, like, oh, well, actually, this isn't going to be inflationary because we have these demographics expansion here and the dollar demand, and then they like kind of hand wave it away. And then the same thing like happened with like oil, right? And the pipeline, like this stuff is like kind of like obvious when you cut this production, you do all these like prices go up, right? But their baseline thing is like, they're like, okay, we think that these policies need to be put in place for what we consider to be the greater good. And even if they hurt people, it doesn't matter. We'll just lie to them and we'll harm all these people, because what we're doing is getting to this end state where the world is better and the ends will justify the means, right? And in the meantime, they're sort of like destroying their credibility. I mean, like obviously like the oil and climate change stuff is like the biggest example of this, right? Like they basically have this idea that like the world is going to move to this like place, this panacea where there's like renewable energy, all this stuff is evil, right? And it's obviously going to be really harmful to all the little guys to just go there really, really quickly, right? Because people can't buy $50,000 electric cars like all the rich white liberals can in San Francisco, right? There's a lot of people who can't do that, and they depend on these things, right? But they just sort of like invent these like elaborate reasons for why the thing that they're doing is it's not actually going to be how. Oh no, that's not why it happened. And it's just like all bullshit, right? They want to get to this place. They think the ends justify the means. They make up a bunch of like elaborate lies and try to wave some like experts, quote unquote, in your face to like justify it. And then 12 months later, you look back and you're like, oh, like, that was bullshit, right? It's the same thing every time. And this is why people are like losing faith in everything.
The best example is just to follow their narratives. The first narrative was inflation is transitory. And then for a brief moment, we had the inflation could be good for you narrative, which was like late November, early December. Feel free to type in, inflation is good for you. And you'll see around end of November.
Yeah, I remember that.
End of November, early December, there were articles like why inflation can be good for everyday Americans. And I remember we were trading this back and forth in our thread. Like, what the fuck are they talking about? And they kind of like weave this narrative where your wages are going up. And they left out the part where, your expenses are going up faster than your wage growth is. So you can kind of follow this path. And then I think they saw this easy outlet with this invasion in Ukraine to kind of put it on a villain, and they will continue to. This won't stop all the way up until the midterms. And just go back and look at the January inflation report if you want to, center yourself back to reality, because energy was one of the highest pieces of that January inflation report. In addition to food, in addition to housing prices, those three were the largest increases in that January inflation report before this invasion happened. And they're going to start to pin food inflation prices on this war as well, because a lot of potash. Yeah,
is there not a real case of supply shortage because of this conflict and things coming out of Ukraine? Or just generally when it comes to, especially like food, just take food as an example. Like this has been a topic that's come up. Does this war affect things, and to what degree really is the question?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it does, right? Like I think when it comes to food, fertilizer is definitely a big export of Russia, which impacts food prices. Oil, particularly in Europe, is supplied by to a large extent by Russia. And when you look in the U.S., though, it's low single digit amounts of oil come from Russia. So when you're talking about how much you pay down the street to the gas, for gasoline to fill up your car, it'd be hard pressed to say that, U.S. oil gasoline prices are due solely to this Russia invasion. And there's a whole supply and demand matrix comes in. I'd say there's probably a handful of other reasons and why oil is higher than this. Granted, oil is a global market, and it's determined by, the global supply and the speculation of that supply in the future. So we did see a spike up to 125. We're back down to under 100. Right? Yeah. So
we should just get it from the mullahs. They've got plenty.
Yeah, and just before this, we were, just hovering around 85, sub 90. So we're not that far off from where we were. But, just kind of center yourselves back to where we were in January, and be cautious about the narratives that come out leading up to the midterms.
I got a interesting question too. Like, so we've been talking about misinformation and how like any political regime is going to try to like dupe you into their own narrative. Is there room for an alternative? Is there space now? Like, are we as a populace awakened enough where we could like accept something completely different? Like, could we accept sort of more truth? It's like talking to your kids almost. Like, I don't think none of us have kids. So it's like, we're not really like talking like that, but like when you're talking to your children, you don't want to just like give them the truth, right? Like, that would shock them.
Like Santa Claus doesn't exist. You mean that type of truth?
Right. So you kind of have to maintain a little bit of that. I am imagining, I'm imagining, I have never been present, but I'm imagining that's like part of it. What do you think? Like, is there room for some different path where you don't just have to just like feed bullshit?
There's asking
room? If the system just doesn't support that, right? Like the whole system, like people are open to the taking of, like people are learning, right? People are waking up to a degree, right? But the system is sort of designed so that you're just sort of forced to choose between these two like establishment extremes, and then each side spends their entire existence sort of like fear porning the other side into being like, yeah, I know this guy looks like he's going to die any day, but like, we can't have that guy. Right. And each side just does their version of that. Right. And then people are just like, yeah, you're right. It's just, that would just be so bad. So I got to take this piece of crap over here, 'cause I don't want that worst piece of crap. Like, I don't know how this changes until like we fix that.
I think we're going to see a widening of the extremes. So here's a few data points. So 538 has, polls on approval or disapproval of Joe Biden. And I think the White House and administration and kind of media machine that happens in any presidency, in any administration, will latch onto this. February 26th. So that was probably the previous 7 days. So kind of like on the date that the invasion happened, Biden's approval rate was 40.8%. And the most recent, as of today, is 42.8%. So he bumped 2 to 3 points in approval rating since then. So, I think they will latch onto this and continue to ride it into the midterms because they're showing. But what's also interesting is that his disapproval rate has kind of also gone up. So you've seen the people who already disapproved of him increase their disapproval because maybe they see this faint and brazen kind of lie being proposed to them. But people who've seen how he's responded to the invasion and how we've responded kind of increased. So I don't know. I think it's interesting to point out that his approval rating is kind of slightly bumped up since then. So we'll see.
Yeah, those are two very, very opposite things. And yet they can both be true. Interesting. All right. Do you guys have any more closing thoughts on this topic?
I mean, just kind of to transcend the topic. I mean, Armand, you've been talking recently about just how this is a problem of our time. You know, how do we determine what is true? And this is like a classic example of it. We're living it real time, and we kind of have to rely on our close group of friends and the people we follow to kind of help us filter through this. And you risk creating an echo chamber for yourself, but you also have to choose how you filter your own media and your own information. And so hopefully, you know, we're somewhat of a middle ground for filtering that information. But it's certainly going to be one example, one data point in, you know, a multi-decade, you know, problem that you've kind of continued to bring up, which is how do we know what is true? So it'll be, you know.
Yeah. You know, another related thing that we have to be careful about right now, in terms of accepting what's given to us, is around this war. I mean, everything coming out of both sides right now is just complete propaganda. I mean, it's impossible to know anything. I mean, like, you know, it's funny. Like, I remember like when conflicts happened in the past, Twitter used to serve as like a source of truth because you assumed that you were getting the intel directly from the citizens of the country. Like, in Egypt, when shit went down, you know, years ago, like that was a way to really stay in touch with reality. Like what's happening at ground zero. You can't trust anything anymore. Not only is the Ukrainian stuff propaganda, but the Russian stuff is obviously propaganda. So that's a really challenging thing to deal with in general. I don't know if you have anything on that, Stephen. I know it's a passion topic for you, but if not, we can transition to immortality.
Yeah, I don't know. I think people just need to get better at being aware of their surroundings, you know? Like whenever you're seeing something on Twitter, you just always have to ask, okay, where is this coming from? What is their agenda, right? Like everybody has some sort of agenda. There's very few people who are just putting stuff out there to the universe just because, right? And I don't know what there is to do other than to either do the work to kind of dig into stuff or to just, you know, take a step back whenever you want to feel like really like outraged by something or like something so obvious. Like it's good to check yourself and take a couple steps back because things are not always that way. You know, they reminded me of something that Nick was talking about earlier in terms of like disinformation with like the administration, right? Like the other thing I've seen thrown around is like there's this throwaway line they're using, like, oh, there's 9,000 leases, not like why don't they use those leases? And it sounds like, yeah, why not? Like it sounds like very duh for like somebody who doesn't know a lot about the topic, but like there's a lot of stuff they don't tell you, right? Like I think that the number of leases not being used is at like an all-time low right now. Like I think like something like 75% of like all leases are like being actively drilled on, which is, as far as I'm aware, is like all-time high levels, right? There's also a lot that goes into getting these things up and running, and you know, besides just getting they do this like hand wave thing where they're trying to put it off on like, oh, it's the corporations who don't want to do it, right? It's the same thing behind like they're trying to blame the greedy corporations for the price hikes, like, oh, their profit margin. Like this is the first time in history like corporations realized they could like raise prices to make more money or something. It was never an option before. It's just so dumb for anybody who knows like basic economics. Business. Right? It doesn't pass the smells test. But like people buy this bullshit, and you know, until people become a little more educated and skeptical and start calling it out, it'll keep happening. But I do think that like they're slow to adapt, right? I think that the bullshit doesn't really work well at all anymore, and they're going to keep going back to this well for a long time before they realize that, you know, the tides have shifted. It's a different ball game out there, and that's why they're probably going to lose like very, very bad, and then have some sort of come to Jesus moment, and then we'll get the next party to come in and do the same stupid shit, and and we'll be having the same conversation.
One little piece of alfalfa on this topic as we transition. One of the few people that I know today who I can say is doing the best job they can possibly do. Like to your point, Stephen, they have their own motives and you have to try to parse out what the real motive there is. But the person that I think is doing honest work, honest, hard fucking work at identifying truth and talking about like basically like a one person version of this little political culture segment that we have on Alfalfa is Russell Brand. And for someone who doesn't watch Russell Brand's content, if they're hearing that for the first time and they're thinking, wait, you're talking about the long-haired British comedian guy who like humps things and he's a complete degen and drug addict? Yes, I am. I would highly recommend tuning into Russell Brand's YouTube channel. And if you haven't been exposed to him in the last few years, you will be shocked at what you find. The man is doing really hard, good work. And he does it with a dose of comedy still, but his intellect is through the roof, off the charts. He's a very sharp person. And he is constantly in every single episode and in every attempt that he makes to uncover truth in something, he holds the opposites. He really, really tries to argue for both sides and acknowledges that these two things that he might be proposing can be true at the same time. And my favorite thing is that he leaves it up to his audience. He always says, all we're doing here is we're going to try to dig into what we understand to be true. And it's up to you to decide what is and what to do with that. And we're all going to have a different opinion at the end of this conversation. Great, let's go. And he just dives in. So if you want more of this kind of stuff, I think he's someone that I personally would. And I mean, I hope he doesn't end up being like a charlatan and I'm going to eat my words, but
no, I think it's a good rec. I like Russell's stuff. It's good.
Yeah.
I think you should mention too, that I think he's clean now. I don't think he's any,
yeah.
any longer.
So, of course. No, he had a long road to recovery, wrote books about it. Yeah, he's come a long way. Him and Glenn Greenwald are both fascinating for me lately in terms of, okay. So let's pull our minds out of the political, messy muck that we've been in. Maybe take a deep breath myself and think about I mean, this is a big topic for a lot of people listening, right? The idea of dying, to start there, is not exactly something that people think about very often. And so to even play with the idea of living forever is a wild concept that I don't think anyone ever really takes the time to explore. So what I would like to do is to explore it, to discuss the possibilities of it, maybe even your personal opinion on whether if the option was presented to you, whether you would or you wouldn't, and anything that you can share in terms of longevity and health span research and knowledge you have around what you or people that you may admire or have learned from are doing to increase their health spans. But I think maybe just beginning with like, is it possible? Is it possible in our lifetime, to be specific?
Like,
So
are we talking
forever?
are we talking about forever or like living to 200?
Okay,
I think
so. Vitalik has a thing that he says, which is that I'll give Vitalik. If Vitalik was here, this is I think what he would say. He said on a different podcast that he believes that a person born today has a 50%, and then he upgraded it. He said up to 75% chance of living to the age of 3,000. 3,000 is what he means is forever. You're immortal. So I do mean forever, but let's just call it 1,000 years. Like, do you think that we here could, or that somebody born today in our lifetime could live to see the age of 1,000 or be immortal?
Let me just like define the terms first, because I will answer your question. But I think like what we're talking about now is this idea of like actual age, meaning how many years have you been existing, versus like biological age, which is like how fast your cells deteriorate, how much like energy your mitochondria produces, et cetera. This is like how you can measure. This is like how guys like David Sinclair measure aging. So it's like biological age versus actual. Like I think that.
I mean time.
Yeah. So like maybe time we could exist forever. Like I think like the more interesting conversation, because like I don't think any of us wants to exist in a jar. You know, like we don't want to exist in like a little tube with our mind. You know, like we want to sort of like really exist. You know, like so. You even mentioned the term health span earlier. Yes. It's like that's distinctly different from lifespan, which is in which you're still existing, but health span is like in which you're thriving. I imagine like that's like when you're actually living life versus just like existing within life. And I think defining those terms is important.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. Go ahead if someone has something.
Well, I guess
otherwise I'll dive in.
No, yeah, I wanted
give
to
your
kind
take
of dive
though.
in.
Oh, give your take.
So okay, so my take is this. It's simply that I don't want to live forever. Living forever is a prison. Like the earth becomes your own cell, and you're like your prison cell. Like you're stuck inside of it, and like it sounds awful to me. Like the fact that everything is finite makes everything valuable. So I'm clearly in the camp where I don't want to live forever, but I do want to live longer than like the median
normal,
age, or like the median death rate of like 85 years or whatever it is. Like I'd like to live longer than that. How much longer? I think we're if we were to really dig in on that, it's like, well, what are you sacrificing? Because at some point you also want to live for today. Like you want to be like the best version of yourself today. And how much do you want to sacrifice that to extend the long tail? That's a more interesting combo.
I'm excited for one of the pieces of this because I know that Steven has a distinctly different take on that. So I'm really excited for Steven's take on that, but maybe a couple more like fundamental things to just mention here. So most people, when they think about the idea of living forever and health span science, like that they need to understand is most people misconstrue the idea of immortality projects and research. And they assume that means that you're going to look like you're 200 or 300 or 500. And the moment anybody starts thinking about saggy skin and looking like they're 200 years old and living that long, they're like, absolutely not. Or losing organ function and constantly needing surgery. That is not what the science in this arena is about. What ultimately it's about is preventing aging. It's cellular breakdown that happens that scientists are working on preventing and or reversing. So what does that actually physically look like? Maybe it looks something like this, or something like you're 50 or 60 years old and you kind of are able to stay in that zone physically forever. And if we want to get really crazy about it, maybe it's not a tube, living in a tube, but there is a legitimate idea of merging with AI. There is a legitimate idea of perhaps being more of a cyborg than we already are, by the way, because I think we already are. And perhaps you're partially of this biological organic body that you currently have today. And there's aspects of you that are uploaded and do live forever, and your consciousness has the opportunity to continue existing. So maybe you reach a point where you're 200 or 300 years old and the health span science can't keep up anymore, but you have the option to choose whether your consciousness, yourself, you, Eric, you, Steven, and Nick, as you know yourself today, to continue or not, to turn on or turn off. What if you have the option to literally feel like you have a physical life form, but you're actually living in a VR metaverse? Like, what if you truly would know no difference? Would you choose to turn off your consciousness? I think that most people, and I'll answer for myself, I think that most people would say no for quite some time. I think most people would have no problem living for 1,000 plus years. But to Eric's point, eventually they would almost certainly hit the point where they'd say, thank you and good night. And the reason for that is that life is beautiful because it's finite. all that you know and love and seek to exist for and reach for is there and exists because of mortality. I don't know. I don't think that immortality is actually what we're seeking, because I think that the immortality we're seeking is beyond this consciousness. And maybe it is what we become when we're no longer here. I have no idea, but I think that's important for people to understand. So personally, I would like to live for much longer. But would I want to live forever? No, but I know that there's a lot of things that so I think that's going to be partly possible through your own behavior, what you eat, how you exercise. You know, to your point, Eric, you sent something in the thread. You should talk about this. Glucose levels, some of the science that people like David Sinclair are studying, but most of the formula is going to be through technology. Like I'm not saying you could really fuck yourself up and, be in a bad position and technology will save you. I think it's going to be the combination of the two, but most of the effort is going to be accomplished through technology is my guess. But I think in our lifetime, we'll have no problem living a couple hundred years minimum, like no question.
I hope you're right. Very skeptical of that though. But
you're skeptical because it involves like personal choice. Like David Sinclair's top 2 tips from his book about how to live longer are to eat less calories and to work out, have an arduous workout to the point where you're, out of breath every day. Those are his 2, main tips to live longer. So I'm skeptical to the point that like, we know that as common knowledge and not everyone follows that. And so it probably won't happen. Beyond that, he kind of talks about prescriptions and drugs and other technologies beyond that, but his top 2 tips are pretty simple, and it's up to personal choice at that point.
Are you saying you wouldn't, or because you clearly are? You're just saying collectively people.
Yeah, collectively. It doesn't
you're telling
seem
me
like
that diet. You're telling me that diet and exercise is actually beneficial.
Really going out on a limb there.
Sounds like some baloney.
I think you're overstating the degree of control some people have, though, because from like what I've looked into, like there's just certain people who have particular genetics, like the telomeres on they just don't go down, and then that's how you get these like grandmas who've like smoked like 10 cigarettes a day and just eaten like bacon for 100 years, living 105, and it just doesn't matter what they do, and then there's people who have like a heart attack when they're 45 in spite of the fact that they work out a lot. That's not to say that like you should just give up because like, well, you might be, because you do have some control, but like there's
going to be edge cases in everything, isn't there? Like if you just like focus on the edge cases, aren't you missing the big point? Like,
well, I think the edge case, I think people living to these like really long ages, those people are like the edge cases, and like I think a lot of it is just
today,
genetic,
today. But what about when science catches up and it provides optionality, access to the drugs, ubiquitous access to the drugs? What if the technology becomes cheap and accessible, and it's not only reserved for the rich? And in our lifetime, in 10 or 20 years, we're seeing people all around the world have access to these drugs, not just things that you have to go to your doctor and, beg for, like metformin, which some people here have access to, which let's just mention what metformin is. Can anyone give like Eric, I feel like you have a good, you've done a bit of a deep dive on that, because this is something that David Sinclair mentions. There's a lot of research around, and it is a little bit of an alfalfa hack for people that might be interested. Sure.
And I'll just give the disclaimer that I don't actually think it's a hack. I think it's like a crutch. But what it is it regulates the blood glucose insulin relationship in the blood. So I think like modern Western society has like grown more sedentary, has grown more like eating sugars and like non-complex carbohydrates, which spike your blood sugar levels, and that damages like the insulin relationship with the blood, and then like metformin helps to sort of regulate that. So I think they're showing positive correlation with the drug metformin and longevity, but I think it's not like really the answer. It's just like, I think the answer is actually just like living a healthier lifestyle.
Yeah. For now.
Yeah, I mean, David Sinclair's like a base of his research is you want the lowest blood sugar level, and you want to be as insulin resistant as possible. I've used continuous glucose monitors before. I highly recommend them. They're pretty damn expensive right now. I think it's like $300 for 2 devices, which last you 4 weeks. Is kind of like the kind of open market.
Kind of pop on your tricep there.
Yeah, exactly. They're kind of go right on your tricep, and they hook up into an app, and you turn into a cyborg like Armand mentioned, and it feeds in your, continuous, I think every 15 minutes it measures your glucose levels, and you can kind of track how alcohol and how fried chicken sandwiches and salmon all affect, and tequila affect your glucose levels. And everyone's probably a little bit different, but pretty surefire way to learn about, how your body reacts and how to, and even particularly how exercise impacts those glucose levels. So, in 10 years, I think those should be, pretty widespread. It's kind of mind blowing that insurance companies don't take the standpoint that like issuing those things, particularly to high risk categories, isn't a good preventative metric for humans, let alone the how much they lose when their clients don't keep their blood sugar levels low. I think it should be kind of one of those things that insurance companies proactively and preventively
they're not in the business.
Provide.
They're not in that business, Nick. That's not.
I feel like they are. It just
prevention.
It's just expensive. Yeah, I mean, like if you're an insurance company and you're looking at a risk pool of people, if you could take your highest risk people and lower their mortality rates, or just at least to speak rawly about it, like how much they cost you as an insurance company, like you would most likely like them to slap one of these CGMs on every 3 months before they arrive to their doctor's appointment, so the doctor can look at them and say, hey, you ate this thing at one point, it spiked your glucose levels above 140. We need to talk about that. So yeah, I mean, those things should be widespread.
I want to know, Nick, you as a human being. Yeah. I want to know, do you want to live forever? And do you think that is a desire for a human being? Is there value in that?
Okay. So I think I've boiled this down to one thing that I only care about in this one decision. And I'll start off by mentioning Tim Urban published an article on this, and he issued a hypothetical. So he's the author of the Wait But Why blog, which has produced some pretty viral content about esoteric ideas such as immortality. And he issued this hypothetical. If you had 10 minutes to decide and you could enter in a calculator how many years you will live, what number would you put in? You have 10 minutes to decide. You can't talk about anyone or what else they're going to put in. And the number, what he put in doesn't matter. But what came in to his calculus is what matters. Is all he cared about was what number his closest friends and family were going to put in. Meaning, were they going to put in the same date as him? Were they also going to choose to live 5,000 years? Or were they going to type in something crazy like 50 million years? Or are they going to put in something really low like 500 years, and he'd have to live 4,500 years after that point without his closest friends and family? And if depending on who's listening to this, some people have and some people haven't, but if you've ever lost anyone close in your life, you will know that it brings about a whole new level of pain to the human experience to lose something super close in your life. And I think for me, it comes down to a simple equation: is like, how long can I live with you guys equally a part of my life, including my family members? And that's all that really matters, because I don't want to live, like Eric said, the kind of planet Earth becomes your own cell, and it becomes this painful part when you kind of maybe strike love or friendship, and those continually you lose those friendships and relationships over time repeatedly. And that's when it comes this realization that, this is a cell and not freedom. And so to me, it's about, if we could, all as one live a little longer, that sounds great to me, and kind of use our bodies to the fullest. So I don't know, that's my singular angle on this topic. So if you can kind of do it with your closest friends and family, that sounds a whole lot of fun. I certainly would like to. But if it's not without those, then might want to pull the trigger.
You have 10 minutes to decide. First thing you do, open up Discord, go to Alfalfa and be like, boys, how long are we putting in here?
Wouldn't mind being surrounded by, that's a good community to be around.
Okay, Armand, I got another question for you, like a hypothetical too. It's like, imagine, because like they do show sort of negative correlations to certain like hormones. Like, have you heard of this? Like, it's like this insulin growth factor, IGF-1, they call it. So the more IGF-1 in the body, the less your longevity, right? So like you want to try to limit this factor. So they've like shown this study in mice, and these mice that are like, only 60% of a normal mouse's body weight can live, longer than a normal sized mouse. But it's like, okay, so Armand, you are a strapping young lad. You got a nice muscular structure. Like, what if I told you could live 80 years longer, but you got to be a little raisin? You have to be a little raisin, like a little worthless physical raisin. Like, are you taking this deal?
I think it's a very interesting question. I think that all the things that we know today in health span and longevity science that we think are going to be the factors that enable us to live longer are not even 5% of the equation of why all of us will be here in 1,000 years. I think you guys underestimate all the stuff that will be possible. We're talking about genetically engineering and modifying ourselves. I'm talking about being that cyborg that has a part of its consciousness uploaded into this internet that's in the cloud. I'm talking about living in the metaverse. These are all things that are absolutely impossible to think about right now. So the only things that we do think about are those physical hacks that we can make, like being of a certain amount of weight, controlling our glucose levels, the IGF-1 factor. These are all things we have control over now. I don't think they'll account to more than 5, maybe 10% of what makes a human live longer. Also, I don't think planet Earth will be the prison. You'll have Mars. You'll have probably the local galaxy as a whole. And we'll probably at that point, I don't know, maybe even have the option. I mean, the question is, do you want to be there when we are an intergalactic species? Because we're going to make it. So do you want to be there for that? Is really the question. Steven wants to be there for that.
Are you sure we're going to make it? Because I'm just positive to go up to 3,200. Like, are you sure we're going to make it intergalactic?
I'm positive we're going to make it. I know we're going to make it. And Steven's going to be there with me. I don't know about you guys. Steven?
I just like don't get you guys on this like live forever thing. It's like
I thought you wanted the most.
You guys are like overcomplicating this, right? This isn't some like weird philosophical experiment where you're choosing like immortality, like some cursed Greek god who like wants to end it all and he can't, right? Living forever, having the ability to live forever is just granting yourself optionality. Like if you get bored, just go skydiving without a parachute and just call it a life. Like why wouldn't you at least want the option? Why would you want to take away the option? I don't.
No one's taking away the option. It's the possibility of immortality existing.
No, you guys literally said, I don't want to live. I don't want to live forever.
I see what you're saying.
I don't either. But like we weren't even necessarily talking about what we were talking about because I think with immortality in quotes, it's like assuming you can't just like put a gun to your head either. But like, okay.
No, okay. You're turning it. That's not going to be the reality, right? The reality is going to be there's going to be some treatments and you can live a long time. It's not going to be some like magic spell where like when you take the pill you can never die, and then you have to like decide whether to take the pill. You'll always have the optionality to, do something crazy. Go out with a bang if you want to. So I don't see why you'd want to opt out of that. I wanted to ask you guys though, do Do any of you guys go to any of these doctors locally who are creative with the life extension stuff?
There are some local. I haven't gone to them.
We don't have to name any of them by names, but yeah. I'm sure you have friends. I have friends who are on these like monthly regimens of shooting a whole bunch of stuff into themselves, and I got to tell you, like, they make me really want to do it. They look like just absolute. They all look like Superman, virile and high energy and jacked, and their skin looks great. I feel like a crippled old man like standing next to them. It's really depressing. And I'm like, should I be doing this? Should I just get on the HGH and the peptides and the testosterone and I don't know what else is out there?
If you want your cancerous cells to grow at the same rate your muscle does, then sure, do it. I mean,
make sure you don't have cancer.
I mean, I like these doctors who provide these full body MRIs on a consistent basis. I think that's pretty interesting. There's a company called Prenuvo, which I've been talking to over email about.
I did that.
Is that doing the pajama thing?
Yeah. Actually, I got it from him a while back and just been talking to them. They have one in San Francisco, I think one in Vancouver, and another one elsewhere. They're fairly negotiable on the rates, by the way. But
would you say it was like $5,000 for a full scan?
I think it's like $2,500 for the full scan. You did it? The Prenuvo specifically?
I didn't do it through Prenuvo. I did it in Indigo Valley because it was closer and I didn't have to fly to San Francisco. Same thing, $2,500 full body MRI.
Do you worry that it's just like an elaborate like lead generation thing where they're gonna find something and then like upsell you like, oh well, you got this?
Funny because they are very different from Prenuvo or this other company in the sense that they were not there marketing this at all in that way. It was just something that they offered was to do a full body MRI scan, whereas this is like for the biohacker tribe, right? And so one of the things that these doctors told me before getting involved in this and doing it was they said, are you prepared for the situation where you basically create I mean the whole idea of like, you never want to do a procedure or get a scan that you don't need, even preventatively. I didn't understand this, but a doctor explained it to me really well one time where they were like, what Steven is saying is very possible. You basically open this box and you can't get out of it. You go down a rabbit hole and you think you found something. And then that requires a biopsy or that requires a procedure, that requires more work or more money. So are you certain you want to do this? So it's funny. And I trusted them for that reason because they weren't there to really upsell me or give me another procedure after that. They were just like, we're going to give you the scans. If we see anything, obviously we're going to tell you, but you have to be careful of that. That's something to be very, very careful of for sure.
I mean, I'm looking forward to getting the scan results and then just kind of, seeing where the results lie. And then kind of, I think modern medicine is advancing and there's certain type of issues and cancers that if you catch them early, we have solutions for, particularly, for females, even like breast cancer, if you catch it early, there are solutions and procedures where technology has helped out, increase the survival rate. So, catching stuff early, specifically when it comes to cancer and cardiovascular issues, seem to be like the 80-20 of catching early mortality issues. So those type of scans seem to be
do you remember the name of that scan, Nick, that they do on the heart over 50?
Oh yeah, I have it. I can pull it up for you, but they basically map all your arteries, right? Is that what you're talking about?
They do that over 50. And the doctor I spoke to was like, if you could do a full body MRI and this scan every 5 years, that'd be my number one tip outside of like, diet and exercise as preventative.
It's called HeartFlow.
Oh, that's like a branded name though. Does it say what the actual scan type is?
Is it like
it's something very common?
Angiogram?
Yes, okay. An angiogram.
I think it's more advanced than angiogram. It like 3D models out every artery that you have. but HeartFlow is the one that I know that
CTA, computed tomography angiography, CTA scan is the type of scan you're looking for. And I think they don't recommend it for people like under the age of 35, 40. And if you have any family history, they say go for it right away. If you don't have family history and you have the money, they say go for it once you're like at least 35. But that's like one of the most important hacks because yeah, that can prevent heart disease. And that's a game changer, which is what takes out most people. So that and full body MRI, just getting a high level overview scan of your vessels, as they like to call them, your vessels and your organs, and just making sure everything's clean and dandy and looking good. But again, you have to be careful because it can set you down the wrong path at times. And if you are neurotic at all or on edge about these things, or you tend to worry, not a great look either, because if you even just doing the scans or waiting for the results can be a lot for people. So you got to take each of these things with a grain of salt.
Okay, Armand, I don't think I got a clear answer from you because like I know that you're talking about this theoretical future in which like our human physique doesn't really matter, but like today it fucking does, right? Yeah. And like you're actually working on yours like every day, like you're like building your body to be stronger and faster. But like what if you could choose to sacrifice all that for longevity? Like, is that a choice that you would make? Like, that's something I'm interested in knowing about you as a person.
Yeah, I probably would. I guess, and that science is pretty clear, but maybe it hasn't been like in my face, A and B, if you do this, you'll live longer, sort of thing. I think I've just been following the protocols that I know to be best. But yeah, the answer is I would do it. Currently, I fast.
I think like the smaller mice live longer, smaller dogs live longer than big dogs, like et cetera, et cetera. Like, David Sinclair says, if you just like restrict your calories, that's going to sort of like excite these longevity cells or something like, I think
totally.
That's
totally.
why
I do the skipping. I do the fasting. I have the summary actually in front of me, the longevity health protocol, as I call it, from the book Lifespan, Why We Age by David Sinclair. Here is the synopsis of what he recommends you do beyond just the diet and exercise piece we mentioned. 1 gram of NMN, that's hard to say. 1 gram of resveratrol, vitamin D, K2, a baby aspirin, 83 milligrams, avoid sugar, bread, pasta, skip 1 meal a day, get your blood tested, don't smoke, avoid plastic, excessive UV exposure, x-rays, CT scans, sleep in a cold bedroom, do cold exposure, and exercise. Quite a lot. And I do most of that. I take the vitamin D, the aspirin, the K2. I avoid sugar. I take the NMM. I eat 1 meal a day. I don't do cold exposure that often, all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'm at least in the right direction. How much of that do you guys, do?
Yeah,
I feel like Nick, you do
20% of those.
Smoke like a chimney on every podcast episode we do.
Oh man,
yeah.
I'm kind of like against the calorie restriction, group, because you look at those people, they're pretty frail, and like the amount of muscle mass they have is pretty low. And I don't think most people know this, but like I think the second leading cause of unintentional deaths is falling, and it's obviously for older people who don't have enough muscle mass and bone density, and so they fall and break their hip, and it actually leads to mortality. So I'd rather maintain muscle mass and use other means than pure calorie restriction, to the point of which you're frail and you actually lead yourselves down one of the most common ways to die for humans, which is breaking a bone at an old age.
I mean, isn't there something beyond? Like,
are you saying I'm going to break my hip?
So hold on. Like, isn't there something beyond that? Like, we're talking about like a 90-year-old breaking their hip, but like we're 30s. Like 30-year-olds should be fucking strong. Like 30-year-olds should be.
Speak for yourself.
30-year-olds should be strong dudes. And if you're going to be like a little frail little raisin,
I don't want to be a raisin.
In the interest of life extension, like go have fun doing that. But like, I'll die earlier than you, but have a way more fun life.
So I'm with Nick. I'm not into the whole calorie restriction thing. But I am into the fasting thing. I feel amazing fasting most of the time. But look, I don't really lift weights other than squat and deadlift. Everything else I do is calisthenics. Shout out to K Bogues, a YouTube channel who we learned from and got trained by, at least Nick and I. And like, it's just pull-ups and push-ups, man. And so whatever my body is right now is without any testosterone. It's without any tricks. It's just the supplements that I mentioned and eating one big meal a day and doing pull-ups and push-ups and squats. So if this is the way my body is going to look by doing that, then yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay with that. I feel healthy. I trust that my body is doing the right things
you look
right
great.
now.
You look like you're made of
Thanks,
granite.
man.
Well, the last
I don't miss lifting weights. Lifting weights resulted in injuries, and just it became a lifestyle. I don't think bodybuilding is where it's
deadlifts, lifting weights.
Not like bodybuilding style, where you sit and you do bicep curls and bench press and chest
one
press
rep maxes.
Yeah. Where I was every week was like
so you're not against lifting weights. You're against lifting weights unintelligently.
Thank you for the correction. Yes.
Okay.
One last thing I'll recommend is like Peter Attia in general, but Peter Attia has this Centenarian Olympics, and he basically says like, what are the movements you want to make when you're 100? Maybe you want to be able to pick up your great grandkids, which involves, basically a deep squat and then, an overhead lift. And you probably want to be able to travel. So that means, lifting your 50-pound or 30-pound luggage above your head and putting in the overhead bin in the airplane. And you probably want to be able to walk into a swimming pool, which involves, kind of like a lunge type movement. So he has the Centenarian Olympics. You can look it up and follow it, but there's a certain amount of movements that he's specifically training for when he's 100. And that's kind of his measure of, is his body going to be able to do what he wants it to do when he's 100? So that's, I think, a pretty good model to work from.
Okay. Final point for me. Nobody here has mentioned the blue zones. The blue zones are regions, geographic regions in the world in which like there are a high concentration of centenarians, 100-year plus survivors. And, just like as an antithesis to Stephen's point, like these are all people like where the telomeres doesn't come into play. It's like, it's literally their lifestyle choices in a concentrated area that is highly correlated to a longer lifestyle. So read the book Blue Zones, and it's mostly like diet, exercise, and culture based.
Mm-hmm. Community. I mean, Harvard, grant study, like who you have around you might be the greatest predictor that we currently know today for a long and healthy lifespan. You get sick and you're alone, it's not going to look good for you. And there's far too many people, unfortunately, that are in that situation. So us having each other, friends, any family around, that's proven scientifically to be the most important factor. And that correlates directly to, and is a pattern that's exhibited in the Blue Zones study as well. Like their culture, the people, the community around them is one of the great factors, right? Religion, going to church, being part of something is a big factor. It's kind of the same thing. It's a synonym for a group of friends, community. People that care about you, community. Yeah. All right. Did Stephen answer? Thank you. But did you answer if you're going to live forever? Would you live forever? Would you hit the...
Yeah, I went on a whole rant about it.
Did you guys feel like you got a clear... I
very clearly said you guys are dumb for not wanting to I have the optionality of living forever. It makes no logical sense to me. And
all right.
Of course I would want that optionality.
It wasn't, of course.
A poker player wants optionality. Surprise.
We should all want optionality in our lives. We should all be optimizing for optionality and asymmetric upside.
I like it. This was a blast. That's a wrap, boys. Later, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Let us know how you enjoyed this format. hit us up on Twitter, and we'll be listening. See you in the Discord. Peace.
Thanks, guys.
Peace.